Hey, how you doing? Anthony Ferraro here of Great Sci-Fi. Today is kind of an unexpected build. I was in the discount store just shopping for, just basic everyday stuff for a living. And I always check out the clearance section, and I found like this gold mine. So there was this, I don't know, it's like some kind of virtual AR game thing, I don't know, but it seems like it didn't do very well, and there was bucket loads of these, and they were like $1.29 or some kind of weird price like that. And it was kind of amazing. It is kind of amazing. I mean, look at that thing. It's got like an adult size handle. It's a nice compact size. Usually like the squirt guns I use are a little bulky, and they're kind of more of a toy, so they're weird shapes. And this is just like really stealthy, nice, simple design. Just feels good in the hand. It's like got good feel. It's just so random. So I wasn't planning on doing like a blaster build modification, but I had just done the Mandalorian builds, and I had a lot of leftover materials from doing that blaster, and then I made the holster, so I had like all these like scraps of leather. So this is kind of one of the fun things about doing this kind of work once you're into it. So now I had all this stuff around the shop, right? So this was $1.29. And I bought two, and now I'm like, I should have bought 10 of them. So I'm gonna mod this, right? Just add some weight to it, probably just do paint treatment, and I'm gonna make these handles wood because I have that material left over from the Mandalorian build. And then with the scrap leather, I'm gonna make a holster and a belt. So yeah. So let's go ahead and start modding this and building a holster and a belt. All right, so let's dig right in. First thing we're gonna do is take this sucker out of the box. Yeah, this just has a really great feel. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is unassemble this. We're gonna take out the screws. Got this little magnetized dish here that works pretty cool. And just gonna separate this into two pieces and disassemble as many parts as you can, because that just makes it easier to modify. So what I'm looking at here now is what pieces fit where, and when I take this apart, I'm gonna put a few lead fish sinkers in here. This is something I like to do to give the prop just a little bit of weight, and it really helps the actors. So I just hot glue these weights in there. Usually I just sort of eyeball it, and I kind of get a sense of where the balance is. And now I'm gonna super glue this together. I'll use the screws to put it back together, but I just like to add some super glue because we're bonding this for good. We're never gonna take this apart again because we're gonna use Bondo and other things. So now I'm just prepping the screw holes. They're pretty deep on this, so I'm just sanding them up because we're going to be adding some filler, and I just want to sand the area so the Bondo has something to grip onto. So here's some Bondo. You can get this at the hardware store. It's just some body filler, and we're just going to add a little bit of hardener to that. Not too much, because then it'll set up too quickly. And make sure you really get in there and mix this up. It'll turn pink once it's all mixed together, so it's pretty straightforward. So now I'm just filling up these holes. These holes are pretty deep, so I was just using a stick to get it down in there. And now I just use my craft stick, my popsicle stick, to just smooth this out. You want to get rid of as much excess as possible. And here's the Bondo now that it's hardened. And what we're going to have to do now is sand off this Bondo and make everything flush, and then it fills the holes. At the bottom there was the battery case, and I wanted to make that flush as well. So that's just a little extra sanding. And then we just go to a finer grit so that everything will blend together. And yeah, so now I'm just actually sanding to prep for paint. Since I'm sanding, I want to get rid of these seams. Most plastic toys will have a seam down the middle, and usually you can just sand them and use a little bit of filler. I'm using different sanding apparatus. This is the block, a little hand sanding. This, I got some sandpaper on a stick. Whatever works, right? You just want to get rid of those seams and you want to prep the surface for paint. So now I just use some isopropyl alcohol to clean that all off. I love using that stuff because it just evaporates real quick. And I'm going to put a primer on here first so we can make sure that we filled up all those holes. And you can see there now with the primer, we got a few pits, little divots, and you can see where the seam was not really erased. So now I have some spot putty. And that you can get at the hardware store as well. And we're just going to take little bits of this and we're just going to fill in those little spots, those little divots. And this will be the final step in erasing all those imperfections and those holes that we filled up. Just use a little spatula here. This is, I think, a painting knife that just works perfect for this kind of work. So here's this wood sheet. These are these birch sheets. I really like these. These are wood veneer, and they have a adhesive on the back, and they're about as thick as a piece of construction paper, but it's real wood. And it's a really nice element to add to any piece. So now I'm just tracing these handles, and I'm making the wood the exact size of those recesses that were in there previously, the red plastic ones. And what's nice is these are gonna countersink right into that space where the plastic was. So now I'm gonna take some tape so that these don't move around, and I'm gonna actually just go ahead and stain them with some wood stain. What this will do is it'll really make the grain pop, because if you're gonna use real wood, you wanna show that off. It's just subliminally, you know, it adds value to the piece where it feels like it's something worth some money, right? And then now I just have some beeswax. This is what I like to use to finish and seal up. So now the spot putty is dry. So I'm gonna take a fine grit sandpaper and we're just gonna smooth out all these areas where we filled the pits, and last attempt to get rid of the seams. And with the gray primer, it's just really nice because it really lets you know what's off and what's right. So now we got this in a good place, and now I'm gonna hit it with the base coat of black primer. That's dry, and now we're just gonna do a dry brush on here of some silver paint, and this is what's gonna make it look like a weathered metal weapon, right? So just a little bit of paint on the brush, dry it off on a paper towel. You want this as dry as possible. You're just gonna kiss it, just lightly dust it by, just light little strokes. And this is gonna give it that brushed sort of distressed metal look. So now I just take one last look. And the trick is too to not overdo it, right? So now I'm gonna take some silver rub and buff. This is just a wax with metal in it. And just a tiny bit on your fingers, and just gonna hit the edges and the high points. And you gotta be really careful with this stuff because if you put too much on it, you'll never get it off. It's one of those dances where you just gotta get it just right. Yeah, and I'm really happy with that. Look at that. Those buttons look really cool with that on there. So now we're gonna attach these little wood inlays into the handle, and we're just gonna peel off the tacky back, and then we're just gonna lay them right in there. For some reason, these are a little bit larger than the hole. So what I'm gonna do is I just press it in there, and this actually works out nicely because it gives it a tighter fit. Then I'm just gonna take an X-Acto knife and just really carefully go over that edge so that it's a perfect fit. And you know, I did that unintentionally, like overcut it and then had to cut it to make it fit, and that actually worked out better. It was a nice tight fit. Looks good. And now I'm gonna hit that whole thing with a clear coat just to seal in all that work that we just did. And now this is something I've been wanting to do that I see a lot of the prop guys do that I've never done before, is I took out, there was like a plastic piece of hardware in there, and what I'm gonna do is replace it with a real piece of hardware, a little hex screw here. And it's just one of those things where it catches your eye, and it really sells it that this is a real object in the world. So now I'm going to do some weathering. Usually when I have black guns like this, I like to do a brown weathering. And I'm not going to do a heavy wash like I usually do. I'm just going to do a very subtle brown wash in the cracks and crevices. Just a light brushing. You know, you water this down. And then what I'm going to do is, once I get it into all the spots that I want, I'm just going to take a paper towel and you're just going to wipe that off. Just pat it off. And you can see what looks good. You know, it'll pool up in certain places, and that you don't pat as hard. And yeah, it's, you know, these things, they're not jumping out at you. They're just sort of laying there in the background. And now I'm going to do one more clear coat to seal in all that weathering. And now I'm going to make a holster. I have this leather left over from the Mandalorian build, and I figured, why not? You know, this piece is looking really nice, so I wanted to complete the set, if you will. So I just take the blaster and just with some graph paper, just map out a really basic holster. You know, a holster is not something I'm an expert at, but you look at one, it's a pretty simple thing, right? It's a front piece and a back piece, and you make it out of paper first just to make sure everything fits. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut the pattern that I created out of this hide, and make sure you have a sharp knife. And I've said this before, it's very similar to working with craft foam. This veggie tan leather is a really great material. So now I'm going to wet this, and I'm going to conform it around the blaster. Now this I'm kind of eyeballing, and once I'm in here working the leather, it's a little bit bigger than it needs to be, but that's okay because I'm going to stretch this out. I'm going to leave it to dry, and once it forms and it has a good shape, then I can trim it down. So now I'm going to take the E6000. That's a glue I like to use when I'm working with organic materials, fabrics, and leathers. And I'm just going to glue this together. Now this glue is not going anywhere, and sewing would be too complicated. So here I just picked up this cool belt at the thrift store, $6 there, but that buckle is really cool, and it's got that sci-fi look about it. So now I'm going to take a strip of leather, and I'm just going to cut it to the width of my buckle. And I use this strap cutter here, which is a great tool. I'll have a link to this in the description below. It's, you know, one of those simple things that, you know, it's the same tool that's probably been used for 100 years, but you know, it works perfectly. So now I just add a little notch at the end of this belt just to give it a little bit of interest instead of just a square end on the belt. So now this just pressure fits in there and it grabs. And what's nice about this is, depending on the actor's waist size, you just cut it at the buckle and then you can get a perfect fit. So here I'm just punching the holes for the buckle. And again, so you don't have to put extra holes, which kind of gets a little messy. You just, at the front end that goes into the buckle, you just adjust that to the person's waist. Yeah, that's just a really simple buckle that really will work. So now I'm putting this strap on the holster to hold the gun down. This is just nice visually, and then also too, if you're going to a con or something, it's nice to have that strap on there just for safety and people won't bother with you. And then off camera, I put this other strap on the bottom, which is gonna go on the leg. And again, I just put holes as a sort of design aspect, but really what that is so that it'll fit anybody's leg. All right, so now we just have some basic brown leather dye. And the way I like to do this is with a rag, because we're actually not trying to dye this perfectly, right? With the rag, we're just gonna lightly rub it in, and then that way we get sort of different levels of color, which is what we want. We don't want like a pristine, brand new looking thing. By rubbing it in, some places are darker than others, and so we just work that until it's interesting looking. So now I just do the edges, And you see there how it has like sort of multiple colors and hues? That's really what we want. And you get that by just rubbing it in. So now this is dry, just a few hours later, and I'm just gonna take a really fine grit sandpaper and just gonna weather this a little. Just gonna knock off some of the color to make this a little more lived in. So there, you know, you figure that probably has more hands passing through it. So I rub that off around the corners. And yeah, that's really cool looking. So now the final step, we're gonna condition this leather. I got some mink oil. There's lots of different kinds of conditioners you can use. And the leather just drinks this up and it really has a nice effect. And it's almost like putting the clear coat on it, really. It's just sealing in all that work that we did. And then it also reflects the light really nicely. And that looks pretty cool. And there you can see we still maintain that weathered look, but now the leather is conditioned. And here's the final piece. Really, really happy with the way this turned out. There's just, you know, I got lucky with the shape of this gun. A lot of times the squirt guns are very exaggerated. So that's why I was happy to find this piece. It's really tactical and sci-fi looking. And here it is in the holster.
That came out really good. Now, I edit these videos myself, I produce them myself, and there's certain things, you know, I start to realize I say all the time. Like I always say, I really am happy with the way that came out. But dang, like I am really happy with the way that this came out. I mean, look at that belt. The holster. Oh man, and this thing, it just feels so good. So the point here is this is like once you're set up to do this kind of stuff, right, this came out good because, you know, I wasn't overthinking it. I had all the materials, so I wasn't, you know, worried about cost. And then the result is something that I'm really, really proud of. Like this is definitely a showcase piece for me. And in my projects, a lot of my swashbuckling rogue kind of Han Solo characters, I tend to cast those as women. So this blaster is actually a better size for my actress as well. So this big, huge, bulky thing, like half the size of her leg. All right. The only thing left to do now is to fire it up. I don't know what this one does. It's got these buttons right here. So let's try, let's see. Okay, here we go. That's $1.29 blast. Well, as always, I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. I love to read the comments, and be sure to sign up for the email newsletter. And remember, I'm just here to help make sci-fi when you least expect it.